Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's installment of ClueCon Weekly. This week with us we have Moshe Yudkowsky from Disaggregate Corp. Thank you for joining us, Moshe, today.
Thank you for inviting me aboard.
Would you like to give us a quick introduction about yourself, your company, what you've been doing? I know you have a resume the size of Texas, so there's a lot to know.
Yeah, I'd actually like to move to Texas one day. Okay, let's see. Background: I started out in physics. Believe it or not, I have a Ph.D. in physics. I left the university and I went to Bell Labs, where I worked and tried to work my way toward the physics part of Bell Labs, but they were never hiring. And so, when I was trying to work my way towards the physics part of labs, I moved into the department that did speech technology. And that was a great place to be. Everybody was really smart, bright people, easy to work with, and worked on several projects there. After a while, in about 1996 or so, I moved from there to Dialogic, which was a company that did telephony, computer telephony, and that's how I got involved with computer telephony. And then stayed there until 2001 after the Intel takeover, and struck out on my own. I had some spare time on my hands. The morning that I left Intel, I was saying, I really want to write a book. And then in the afternoon, I said, hey, now I have time. I can write a book. So I went out and wrote a book called The Pebble and the Avalanche: How Taking Things Apart Creates Revolutions in Technology. Book's still available. And then I did consulting, and eventually, for the past, I'd say, 10 years or so, I've been on a 6-month contract, this way that I like to phrase it. We just kept on renewing it indefinitely to a company out in California that's doing an interesting computer telephony contract. So a lot of my consulting, or almost all my consulting work, is with this single company right now, but eventually it will die off, and I'll go and do something else, or I'll retire, move in with my grandchildren. I'm not sure which.
Well, I don't often have someone on the show that has a published book, so I'd like to know just a little bit about that more. What's the topic and what kind of people should be looking into it?
Oh, well, I think, of course, everybody needs to read the book and memorize all the
Mhm.
contents. But what happened was, I was working with a industry consortium, and we had this meeting, and the facilitator, who knew nothing about technology, asked a question. He said, "What do all of these milestones we're doing? What are the milestones in our computer in the telephony industry?" And I had this epiphany, and I said, well, every single time that we had a major breakthrough in telephony, it was because there had been some correlation in technology and we broke it apart. To give you an example, it used to be everybody worked for one company. It was Bell Labs. Oh, sorry, it was AT&T in the United States. And we broke it apart into many pieces. And then it was this idea that well, if you look, well, anyway, it went on from there. If you look at your modern computer, right? The original computers were all monolithic. I used the original computers. I
Yeah.
used computers where you had little Nixie tubes and you had to dial it in. What happened? Look at the modern computer. There's a program from one company to do this. There's a program from another company to do this. And all the basic pieces of it are run by separate projects. And they come together into this massive, extremely interesting piece. We have the internet, which allows anybody to connect them to it. And so I realized what we have here is taking things apart is what powers the revolutions in technology. And there was this one smart guy in the back of the room. He was staring at the blackboard where I had gotten up and said, well, what do you think? And he said, looked at me and said, I'm trying to figure out how to make money from this idea. So I wrote a book on the topic. And the book gives several different examples of how this happens and categorizes it, where you disaggregate. This is the name of my company. You take apart ownership or responsibility or just technology or something like space and time. Why are phones so interesting? Telephony itself. Well, it used to be you had to be in the same room with somebody to have a conversation, right? No longer have to do
Yep.
that. This podcast, you don't have to listen to it live, right? It can be disaggregated in time. It no longer has to be live. Phonograph records. That's why phonograph records were so amazing. You can have a performance, and then somebody can listen to it 10 years later in a different country. So these kind of ideas, even on a small scale, can create revolutions in technology. There you go. And that's what the book's about. That's quite the ad. Okay, sorry. I'm
No,
passionate
no, no. I
about the
mean,
topic.
that's very, very interesting. I mean, I'm gonna have to read it because I exist in this weird space between developer advocacy, research and development, and demoing, which sounds like it's a great point for me to
Oh, yeah.
start reading things again.
The absolute masters of this are Amazon. You look at Amazon AWS. It used to be that they would rent you a computer, right? They would rent you a computer or an equivalent of a whole computer. And then people started renting you a computer equivalent for 10 cents an hour. And now we'll let you just execute a single function, right? And charge you by the millisecond. They have disaggregated the entire interface down to nothing, to the function level. It's amazing. They've done an amazing job with it, and they're wildly successful and worth a lot of money. So that's their secret. Now you
Uh, That's very true. Amazon is doing things quite differently. And what I find funny is that, well, not funny, I mean, interesting, is that a lot of people actually think of Amazon as the company who sends them stuff when they buy it. While that's pretty much just the consequence of everything else they did. Like it's almost a side effect that they're able to fulfill an order with that capacity, that speed, and that precision. It's not their actual goal. I mean, it's weird to say it like that, but their internal goals are fix, resolve problems, not really to ship you stuff faster.
right, right. So it's a technology company, and whereas I think of it as my shopping utility, but really it's something else entirely. At this point, it's mostly technology. You're right, and
Yeah, I think.
logistics. Don't forget the logistics.
Oh yeah, I think they do quite a bit of revenue out of the AWS type of side of the business. I assume it's not their main revenue, but they think I'm not even sure Amazon ever expected AWS to get that big. To be fair.
It is an astonishing application of taking the entire experience of computing and disaggregating to smaller and smaller pieces, logging, storage, database, just to and continuously wear it away into the smallest possible piece and letting you construct it completely out of these tiny little parts. It's wonderful. And if you like, Lego blocks or one of those other toys, you're perfect for Amazon.
Oh
You can
yeah,
build anything you
absolutely.
want.
Cool. So, I hear and I know that you have been involved in the speech technology in general since I wouldn't say the dawn of time, but you've been working in the space for a while. And one thing that feels like to me is that the open source. So, ClueCon Weekly has always been about open source. So far, we try to at least do one segment about open source in every interview.
Right.
Feel like the open source space is incomplete in that I've never been able to find a very good either speech recognition or speech synthesis system to be used to be coupled with stuff like Frizzwich, who is actually one of the best. I'm not saying this because Frizzwich is sponsored by SignalWire, but I truly think that Frizzwich is the best media platform and media switch probably in existence, certainly in the open source space. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing to pair with FreeSwitch that will do speech recognition and speech synthesis that's even remotely on par with what has been done in other areas in open source. I was curious if you have any opinion on that. Like, why is that the case?
Why is that the case? The reason I think, okay, I don't use open source. I rarely use open source in speech. You're absolutely right. In fact, I'm trying to remember. I was going to download and try one of them, and I can't even remember the name of the platform. I'm embarrassed to say. They're the same guys who do. Well, anyway, the reason is it's extremely difficult, and it's difficult to get right, and it's expensive. In order to, let's say, do English. Let's say I want to do the English language recognizer. Now, there are companies, there are open source projects that have done this, and I just haven't tried them out. I haven't had the time. I'm busy getting ready to do some other stuff. Um, let's think of it this way. I want to do English language recognizer. I have to go to each region of the United States, dialectical region. Or if I want to do it in English from England, there are 21 different regions in England. Okay? In
And they're
terms
all
of
very
how,
different.
right, very different speech. You can do almost incomprehensible. Um, and you have to go out and find people who grew up in that area until the age of 14. And you have to get them to say words. And then you have to get them to, and you have to then go in and listen to the speech. And you have to mark it up so that you can correlate the speech with the word, the waveforms with the words is the way you're supposed to think about it. And once you've done all that, then you can start feeding it into your recognizer. Now, of course, I'm thinking about the old technology, the hidden markup models. But even if you're not talking about hidden markup models, you have to do something equivalent, more or less, for machine learning models. This is very expensive. And we had somebody, when I was at Bell Labs, we wanted to do an English recognition system. And we sent somebody to live in England for 6 months to do this. This is expensive. And because it's expensive, you don't have a lot of English language. I haven't seen a lot of recognizers or open source projects. There is one project I want to try out. I can't remember the name. Okay, you should have warned me. I would know it off the top of my tongue. But yeah, it's not easy to get done. And if there's a profit motive, sure. The other problem is when I happen to be looking at one of the major companies. Google has recognition, Microsoft and AWS, and they all have recognition. I'm looking at one of these. I can get what it is, like, 50,000 or 500,000 utterances per month for free, or some other crazy number like that. Well, that would handle a lot of projects. So they're actually defeating the open source in terms of cost. Open source costs you time and money. Google will do essentially that for free. So which one do you get? Do you get the free one, or do you get the one that's going to cost you a lot of money? Google is essentially almost free in that sense. Does this sentence make sense in terms of what I'm saying here? Or Luca, what do you got?
That's pretty much the same feeling I have. In the end, I think the reason why, especially Spanish has been lagging behind so much, is that effectively there is no easy way I'm an engineer, so from a technical point of view, it feels like there's no easy way to contribute to a project like that outside of actually sitting down and saying, I'm contributing a month of my time to this. The
Right.
what I can add there is that I feel like running and tuning, especially speech recognition, speech synthesis is a little bit easier now with the newer
Mm-hmm.
deep learning type of technology, right? The fact that you can record a lot of audio and then mix and mash those words, effectively getting new speech out of it, which is something that has been done. The speech recognition part requires too much continuous commitment from someone. So unless you get I keep going back to Friswich, but unless you get the Anthony Minasalis of the world, who literally one day sat down and wrote Friswich and didn't stop writing until it was done with version 0.1, it's very, very hard to get contribution. There's a separate discussion we've had on this podcast multiple times about how it's become harder to get people to commit for longer times to open source projects for various reasons, including the fact, silly enough, that the business has more money in it than it used to have 15 years ago. So anybody who's good at what they're doing is getting paid for it and doesn't have time for free work. It sounds
Right.
silly, but it's not far from the truth. Any engineer that can write code today as a job, anytime they like, they literally just need to go outside and yell, "I'm a
Oh, real
programmer," and
hey,
and they get hired. So that's probably the case. People don't have the time anymore, and companies outside of a select few, SingleWire does, don't really foster doing open source work inside the company. We have dedicated people working on the open source stuff. We've just released the reference to StirShake implementation. We do a lot of work in Frizzwich, etc. But not many companies do that because, you're paying for those hours, so you might as well just get something you can build for. Speaking of open source, speaking of Frizzwich, leads us to ClueCon. And I hear you're going to be a speaker at ClueCon, right?
Yes, I'm going to be a speaker at ClueCon. Actually, I'm going to point to it. Right behind me over here. This is my talk. Now, I have a little bit different process than most people. I actually sit down with a sheet of art paper with 18 by 24. I put it on an art table. I put a bunch of colored pens next to it, and I keep on scribbling over it. And after a couple of iterations, I have my talk. And what you see now is just the beginning of the talk. I'm afraid it's
I'm
not ready
going
yet.
to have to try that. I mean, that's just awesome.
Well, yeah, you have to sit there and say, I mean, the first iteration is just drawing circles. Here's your separate, this and connections, and that's the first iteration. The second iteration is you take a big sheet of paper, you draw a slide. What goes in this slide? What goes in that slide? What goes in this slide? And then you can lay out your talk. There are no tools that I have never found a tool that compares to the sheet of paper when it comes to just sitting and thinking. I guess I'm too old.
No. I actually do a lot of whiteboarding.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a little bit of a constrained space here, so my whiteboard is over there. But I just go in front. So I do a similar process, but the whiteboard is less permanent. I feel like I want to try the paper thing because at that you have to really think before you commit, and it's hard to go back. It's pretty interesting as a thought process. I would love to copy that.
Well,
So
the
what
other
is
thing
the
is you can sit down. See, I'm sitting at a chair. I've got
yeah?
the just lay
So
your
what is
piece.
that development process leading you to? What's your talk about?
What's my talk about? Okay, well, last year during the pandemic, I sat down at my computer, and I'll send you a link to the article if you don't have it already. And I sat down at my computer and I wanted to get a COVID-19 shot.
Hmm.
Right? I wanted to get the flu shot. And I wanted to do it soon because I had people coming to visit me, and I couldn't have them come to visit me if I wasn't immunized. Okay, great. Actually, sorry, it wasn't last year. It was March of this year. My brain is a little fried from pandemic stuff. So I sit down and I start going online, and I realized while I was doing it how poorly the websites were put together. And I'm going to give you a little imaginary talk. I'm going to pretend to talk to the website. This is how it went. Okay, I'm going to.
Huh.
Hello, welcome to my website. Hi, I'm Moshe. I would like to get a vaccine. Oh, okay. Where do you live? I live over here. Here's a list of 7 pharmacies where you can get your website. You can get your vaccine. Okay, great. Thank you. Would you like to try this day? Yes, I'd like to try this day. Would you like a shot between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m.? Yes, I would. Sorry, there's nothing available. Would you like to try 9 a.m. to 12 a.m. p.m.? Yes, I'd like to try that. Oh, sorry, nothing's available. What? How about between 12 and 3? Sorry, nothing's available. Okay, would you like between 3 and 6? Oh, I'm sorry, nothing's. Oh, it was like that. I had to, for each pharmacy, there was a list of 7 pharmacies. It was something like I had to make 42 separate attempts per pharmacy to find a.
Because
To find out if they had a flu.
if it's like 2 hours lots and it's 12 hours in a day of opening, it's 12 by 7 just to
Yeah,
try and get.
exactly. Right, exactly. And then you after you went through that pharmacy, you had to go to the next pharmacy.
Oh.
Now, and they weren't the only ones. There was another pharmacy that said, "Oh," said, "Would you like to try this pharmacy?" Sure. What kind of vaccine do you want? I want COVID-19. Okay, and then would say, "Sorry, nothing available." And then we have to go back and try a different pharmacy, and they had a list of maybe 20 of them. And so I realized one of the problems we have. Oh, and by the way, I was just at that same first pharmacy again, and I went and I said, I want to get a booster shot. I want to get a booster before we go to before I show up in person at ClueCon in Chicago. And once again, it says, "Oh, you had Moderna." Well, we don't have Moderna here, but it doesn't say where else you have. Where else can you get Moderna?
Mhm.
It doesn't say. Try a different pharmacy. Well, which one? Well, you got a dozen in the Chicago area. Okay. So the problem is that people look at websites, and this is what my talk is about a little bit. People look at websites and don't bring their sensibility of how speech works, how an interaction works with a human to that website. If somebody had looked at it and said, I would never put up with this in a phone call. Could you imagine talking to somebody and every time you wanted to check, if a reasonable, smart person were at you called somebody, a reasonable, smart appointment secretary, and said, can I get a vaccine appointment? They would say, we've got this kind of vaccine at this location. Is that okay? Right? That's what they would have done. And the computer, which can do that, didn't do that. Why is that? Why didn't people bring that sensibility when they're developing it? And by the way, it wasn't just this one company and another company. It was multiple companies had this problem where they hadn't thought about what is the use of person interaction is. And so the talk is going to be about what can you learn about websites
And you
from speech, and what can you learn about speech from websites?
which is what you can learn in speech from websites is going to be quite interesting to me as a speech first kind of developer. As recently, I mean, I keep saying recently, but I've been doing this in 2009, so it's not very recent to be fair. And it's yeah, the voice interaction design is oddly an understudied topic if you compare it with website interaction design. There are books, there's some people you can go hear a speech from. One is you, and there's a few others, but there's not many others that are experts and that can be you can get some insight from, if you get what I mean.
Well, it depends on how it's set up. When I was at Bell Labs, the head of the department, so I was the department that did speech recognition, right? Several groups. The head of the department was not somebody who was an expert in speech technology. She was an expert in human interaction. And by golly, she was brilliant, and all the people that she had with her in that team were brilliant. And they could tell you things about speech technology and how interactions work. And we did testing. We would put somebody in a room and let them run through a interaction and record it. That's the way you get this stuff done. But
Yeah.
really, the other key to it is, I'll tell you another little secret, because I was looking through my books. I'm starting to review some of the articles, and I said, wait a minute, I don't remember writing this article. But anyway, I wrote an article in one of the books. It's like, okay, fine. That's what happens. You have to remember what your goal is. Okay, let's say you're trying to improve voicemail. I may have spoken about this in speech tech, but I might not have. I just can't recall. I've given a talk someplace else for sure. When you try to improve voicemail, you're not really giving the customer what they want. When they called, they wanted to know things. They wanted to know, did you get the note I sent you? Did you review it? Do you have any comments? When will you get back to me? This is what they called you for. And that's not what you offer them. What we offer them is the opportunity to make a recording. Okay? Voicemail itself is a substitute for corporate call centers. Before there was voicemail, if I called you and you weren't there, it would go to a corporate call center, and there was a pool of people who would take messages. But that was really a replacement for the departmental secretary. And you call in, and if you weren't at your desk, the secretary would answer and take a message. But that was actually a replacement for the personal secretary. Okay?
Which used
Right?
to be more common and then sort of.
Right. Exactly, because they're two. Okay. So what happened was part of it was the expense. People became more expensive. things became less expensive. When I was growing up, doctors made house calls. If you were sick, a doctor could come to your house. We don't do that anymore. People are too expensive. Computers, on the other hand, became extremely cheap. So we're using computers to replace some of that interaction. And by the way, that secretary, that was a replacement for your personal assistant or your executive assistant or your gentleman's gentleman or your lady's companion, the personal, Now,
Yeah.
if you sit down and try to improve voicemail, this is what you're doing. You are trying to improve a replacement for a replacement for a replacement for a replacement for a replacement. Okay? So
Ultimately, it goes all the way back to the 1800s butler
exactly.
that will take a message for the lord of the house, and then
Whoa, not only that, but the personal butler was really if your personal gentleman, your gentleman's gentleman, or your executive assistant who knew everything about you. Right?
yeah,
When I want to, it used to be, you'd say, George, please send a $50 donation to XYZ. And I was done. Now I have to go to a web page, log in, and find the thing. Okay, it's a lot different. So if you're thinking of doing speech technology interface, you say, well, what is it that the customer wanted in the first place and actually offering? Can I make it an improvement on what he wants, the customer wants, and not an improvement on the technology that I have to substitute for what the person wants? We are actually now with artificial intelligence getting to the point where we have wizards. We can have like a little wizard, and a magic wizard in a box who can do everything for us. Okay?
yeah.
Now, so why we don't think about improving voicemail? Think about letting that magic wizard talk to me. That's what we really want, right? So, Luca, did you get that email? I'm calling Luca to find out if the email got you. Maybe the
Or
assistant.
is the meeting it for tomorrow confirmed, or are you coming to ClueCon?
Right, exactly. Are you coming to ClueCon? Right, exactly. There's if you can look it up, you can find Apple Computer made a um, commercial years ago in like 1986. I mean, a long time ago. And it was somebody opening up a pad, sort of a pad, like it looked like a notepad on their desk, and talking to a computer. And the computer could do all sorts of hard tasks, such as, I think there was a paper written by Luca on this topic. Can you go look at where is that? You go, oh, it was Luca, and the computer answers, oh, it was Luca and something, wrote it something. Okay, would you show it to me? And the computer shows it to him and says, make a note about that. And so essentially he was conversing with the computer as if though it was their personal assistant. We're not too far from that right now. It has a lot of difficult problems, but we're not too far from it. So think about that when you're doing your next user interface. How's that for bad advice?
That's really something to think about. Yeah, there's plenty of interesting. There's another conversation that well, you're the okay. So here's something that came up with the last podcast, and
Okay.
we didn't have an answer. So I'll ask you. You're an expert. Chatbots. Chatbots seem to be less useful than people make them up to, and I say this at my peril because I routinely build chatbots demos for various stuff. It
Right.
ends up like a chatbot seems to be useful only as again a substitute of a of someone. For example, I've seen a chatbot work very well when it was deployed as a helper for a large yoga event in Milan, in Italy. So they had thousands of people coming in, of course,
Mm-hmm.
before everything happened. They had thousands of people coming in that were asking the same 5 questions over and over. Where can I park? What's the price of the ticket? How long is the event? Is it for advanced or base people? What should I bring? That kind of stuff. That worked out very well. Then I've seen people trying to do FAQ style bots that are supposed to know everything about a company, and 90% of those calls or web-based interactions end with the bot sending you to an actual light agent because it doesn't know what you want. So, why are chatbots really older cracked up to be, or is it the technology not there yet, or are they being used wrongly? What's your take there? Because last time I spoke with another guest, we came to the conclusion that's probably the technology that's not there yet.
Speech technology. When you use, think once again, think about talking to a person. When I talk to my speech recognition systems, I have a very limited vocabulary of things that I can do. And there's a limited range of words. Not only that, the questions I ask are very specific. I'll say, where do you want to fly? I want to fly to Denver. Where are you flying from? I'm flying from Chicago. When do you want to go? I want to go on Tuesday the 18th. These are the questions. We do that deliberately in speech so that we can limit our recognition and we have a single topic that we're trying to do. Now think of a chatbot. In a chatbot, I'm writing to you and I'm emulating a person. And generally speaking, the questions people ask on the chatbots are open-ended.
Right.
Now what I have to do is I have to have the technology to understand the open-ended question. And do I have that technology? And the answer is not really. Can't lead you through everything. See, if you say, I have 5 questions I can answer, which is your original one, right? I have a very limited vocabulary. And I'm going to do keyword spotting, whoever it is that it works in the chat. Thank God I've never worked with a chat bot. I would hate to do it. But, and your experience that you've, right? Once you get into some detail, now you're with a live human.
Yeah.
So
The
one way to
bots will do well with some open-ended questions when they're still reconducible to an extractable entity that you can then aggregate. So, what can I eat when I am in Atlanta? And the bot will generally be able to figure out you want to know a few restaurant names and maybe give you, I don't know, the top 5 it finds in the list. Hey, you can go have barbecue at this place, or you can go have a burger this other place, and there's the very good fish place over there. But more complicated than that, like even stuff like what can I visit or what shows are on, it's far harder, especially if you don't really have much context.
Well, sure. But now you say what show, right? So what kind of show? Is it a theatrical show, a movie
Yeah.
show? Is it a dog show? Is it a show? Is it a art gallery showing?
In a
So
sense,
you
it
have don't
feels
have to
like,
you know.
sorry, it feels like it falls into your pharmacy example earlier. Like the pharmacy example you gave earlier, in a sense, it's an interaction gone wrong because it was too boxed into its own rules, and bots very often fall into that place. Like if you were to have the same interaction with the chat bot, it will be even more infuriating than what you had via web.
You know what? I don't think I agree with that. Okay, and I'll tell you why. Okay, the symptom that you get, the way I perceive the problem with those bots, the pharmacy reservation system. By the way, I want to tell you, usually my editors cut the length of my columns to fit, but that one was so funny, and he was cracking up so much he refused to cut any of the words. Okay, so now think about that task. The constraint was the imagination of the people who were putting together the web page. Right? And the constraints were even corporate, the back end systems. They didn't really have a way to correlate all the reservation times at all the different pharmacies. That's the way I look at what happened. And so they couldn't just turn around and say, no pharmacy has a reservation anywhere. So it really depends on what your system is. I'll give you an example from your chatbot. I want to go eat in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you asked the chatbot, I want to eat a Tuesday night at 8 o'clock in Atlanta, what restaurant can I eat in? Very different question. That chatbot would have to have insight into the restaurants, 8 different restaurants or 5 different restaurants reservation systems and know the real-time update. And the chatbot wouldn't be able to do that. What the chatbot would do is send you to each one. You'd say, "Oh, I want to eat at such and such," and now you have to. Now, if you went to the hotel concierge and said, "I would like to get a reservation at a restaurant at 8 o'clock," and I want to eat here, 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 or here, just let me know which one is available, the concierge would do it for you. That's the difference between a human or a computer that's a wizard that can look into all the different places and a chatbot. The chatbot can't do that without extensive interface work, but a human can because they have a phone or a computer or they know somebody.
Yeah, that's really good point to that's a really good point to operate off. Yeah, I guess. Well, so the answer is still we need a little bit of technology more to get things really working like they're supposed to.
Well, yeah. I mean, you could, in theory, have an interface into the restaurants through an API. But could you imagine getting, a million restaurants, 1,000 or 10,000 restaurants in Chicago to all commit using the same API and hook into the chatbot, and then not only do it with your chatbot, but to do it with 87 rival chatbots, and so the restaurant will have to hire 15 people full time to handle the user interactions with the chatbots, right? And maintain the API, and oh my gosh, nobody could afford it.
Yeah, it's not easy at
It's
all.
not going to happen, not in the near future. That's why I say you need actual magic.
Great. So we're nearing the end of our chat, and it's been a great time we had together. We went through a few things disrupting technology, and we went through what open source is doing and the lack of it. We spoke about your talk at ClueCon, which I'm very much looking forward to. Unfortunately, I'm not still sure I will be making it because of the U.S. government not liking me enough to let me in the country until November 1st, which is right after the ClueCon happens. And but still, I'll be there via video and presenting a few things. So I'm looking forward to your talk. And I thank you very much for joining us today. It was a great pleasure having you.
Luca, it was a pleasure speaking to you, and you've given me some great ideas about what to talk about at ClueCon. That's very important. I'm very much looking forward to ClueCon. I haven't seen the ClueCon guys for a year now, and I miss it. That's a great conference. I'm really going to have a good time.
So, for everybody in the audience, ClueCon is happening in Chicago from Monday, 25th of October to Friday, 29th. We have a flash sale going on up until tomorrow for tickets, and we also have an online version you can uh, attend from the comfort of your home. But if you like to show up in person, we'll be all there and trying to have a good time all together. And well, thank you, Moshe, for joining us today, and thank you everybody for being with us. And I'll see you next week.
Okay, thanks. Goodbye.